The room is small, a single lamp, a person kneeling or standing or bent over a task that will never be finished now, because the light in the room has just changed. It doesn't come from the lamp. It comes from a figure that was not there a moment ago, and the person's whole body reacts before their mind can catch up. The knees go first. The breath stops. Every muscle braces for something the body has no name for. And then the figure speaks. And here is the strange thing. Here is the thing you were never taught in Sunday school. Almost every single time this happens in the Bible, every time one of these beings arrives, the very first words out of its mouth are the same three. Not hello, not peace be with you, not I bring a message from the Lord. Do not be afraid. You have probably pictured angels wrong your whole life. The soft, round-cheeked child with little wings. That is a painting from the Renaissance. That is Europe, 1500 years after the fact. It is not the Bible. In the actual text, angels are so overwhelming that the first thing they almost always have to do is talk the human down off the ledge of pure terror. People fall. People shake. People are certain they are about to die. So this is not a story about a phrase. This is not a story about a habit of speech. This is not a story about politeness. This is a story about what heaven says first when it walks, uninvited, into the worst moment of your life. And it keeps saying it. To a slave woman dying of thirst in a desert, to an old priest alone at an altar, to a teenage girl in a town nobody had heard of, to a field full of terrified shepherds. And one day, far from all of them, on a black volcanic rock in the middle of the Aegean Sea, to an old man who will fall on his face before a voice so overwhelming he cannot stand back up. We will get to that old man, but not yet, because before heaven ever reached him, it had already said those same three words over and over across 2,000 years of Scripture. And once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. Once you hear who it was spoken to and what they were actually afraid of in that exact moment, you will understand that do not be afraid was never a greeting. It was a rescue, and it may be aimed at you. Start in a desert, because that is where the first one happens. A woman named Hagar is walking away from her own child. Think about what that takes. She is an Egyptian, a slave, cast out of the only household she has ever known, sent into the wilderness of Beersheba with a boy and a skin of water. And the water runs out. Out there, water is not a convenience. Water is the line between morning and never. So she does the only thing a mother in that position can do. She puts the boy under a bush in what little shade there is, and she walks away. A bow shot away, the text says. And she sits down, and she lifts up her voice, and she weeps, because she has decided she cannot watch him die. That is the moment heaven speaks. Not before, not when she still had hope. Right there, at the bottom, when she has already given up. The angel of God calls to her out of the sky, and the first words are these: "Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad." The Hebrew is altira, do not fear. It is two small words that show up again and again across the Old Testament, almost always at the edge of a cliff. The moment a person is sure the story is over. And here's what most people miss. God does not tell her to fear not because there is nothing to be afraid of. Her son really is dying. The danger is real. He says, fear not because he has already done something about it. He opens her eyes, and she sees a well of water that was there the whole time. Personal stakes. One mother, one boy. That is where the pattern begins. Small and human and quiet. But it gets stranger, because the next time it happens in the holiest room in the nation. Move forward 1,000 years into the temple in Jerusalem and meet an old priest named Zechariah. He belongs to the division of Abijah, one of the rotations of priests who served in turns. And on this day the lot has fallen to him, a once-in-a-lifetime honor, to go alone into the holy place and burn incense at the golden altar while the whole crowd prays outside. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing in that same century, describes this service in detail. The priest steps in alone. The smoke of the incense rises. The people wait in the courts beyond. So we know Zechariah was by himself. No witnesses. Just the lamps, the smoke, and the silence. And then he is not alone. A figure is standing to the right of the altar. Luke tells us Zechariah was troubled, and that fear fell upon him. Of course it did. You are an old man. You have waited your whole life for this one moment in this one room, and now there is someone standing where no one should be able to stand. And the messenger, this is Gabriel, though Zechariah does not know that yet, says it again. Fear not, Zacharias, for thy prayer is heard. Notice the pattern holding. The words come first. The comfort comes before the explanation. Heaven does not open with the good news. It opens by steadying the human who is about to fall over. The stakes have climbed. This is not one family in a desert anymore. Gabriel has come to announce the man who will prepare the way for the Messiah. A whole covenant is turning on this conversation. And still, the opening line is those same three words. Now watch what happens next, because the third time heaven does not whisper it in a private room. It shouts it across an open field, to the last people on earth you would expect. It is night, somewhere in the hills outside Bethlehem. Shepherds are keeping watch over their flocks. Night shift laborers near the bottom of the social ladder. The kind of men most people walked past without seeing, and the sky rips open. Luke says the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and his exact phrase, they were sore afraid, not a little nervous, terrified. Grown men, out in the dark, suddenly standing in a light that has no source and no explanation. If the sky over your own head tore open right now and blazed, you would not be calm about it either. And the angel says it. The fourth time so far, the same three words, into the same kind of terror. Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. And here is where the pattern starts to feel less like a coincidence and more like a signature. A slave woman at the end of her rope, an old priest in a sacred room, a field of frightened working men, three completely different people, three completely different fears. And the exact same opening line spoken by heaven every single time, right at the bottom, right in the shaking, before a single word of comfort or explanation. Hold that thought, because we are only halfway up the ladder. The stakes are about to climb higher than a desert, higher than a temple, higher than a field. And the next person to hear these three words is a teenager who has done nothing wrong at all. Stop for a second, because I want to make sure you are seeing what I am seeing. Three people so far. A dying slave woman, an aging priest, a field of shepherds. Nothing in common, different centuries, different places, different lives. And yet heaven walked into each of their worst moments and opened its mouth with the exact same three words. Do not be afraid. If that pattern is doing something to you right now, if you are starting to feel where this is going, do me a favor and hit subscribe, because the next four are stronger than the first three, and I do not want you to miss them. And if you already know which fear not you needed to hear this week, put it in the comments now before we go on. I read them, because we are about to leave the desert and the temple and the field behind. The stakes have been climbing this whole time. One mother, then a covenant, then a nation. And they are about to climb again. The next person heaven says these words to is a girl young enough to be somebody's daughter. And what she is asked to carry is bigger than anything we have seen yet. Her name is Mary. And the first thing you should let go of is the stained glass version. The calm woman with the golden ring of light around her head. That came later. In the moment itself, she is a girl, probably young enough that today we would not let her drive a car. She lives in Nazareth, a town so small and so overlooked that a man would later ask out loud whether anything good could ever come out of it. She is engaged, not yet married, to a carpenter named Joseph. Her whole future is a set of ordinary, fragile plans. And into that ordinary life walks Gabriel, the same messenger who stood by the altar with Zechariah. And he greets her in a way so strange that Luke tells us she was deeply troubled, turning the greeting over in her mind, trying to work out what on earth it could mean. And Gabriel says it, Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favor with God. Now here the language does something worth slowing down for. In Greek, the phrase is me phobou. And it is not quite do not be afraid, the way we would start a sentence. It is closer to stop being afraid, a command aimed at a fear that is already happening. Gabriel is not warning her about a fear that might come. He is reaching into the fear that already has hold of her and telling it to let go. Stay with me, because this is the heart of the whole pattern. Every single time, heaven speaks these words into fear, not instead of it. Nobody in this video is told there is nothing to be afraid of. Mary has plenty to be afraid of. An unmarried pregnancy in her world could cost a woman everything: her marriage, her standing, in the worst case, her life. The angel does not pretend the danger away. He speaks to her right in the middle of it. And look how high we have climbed. Hagar was one mother and one son. Zechariah was a covenant. The shepherds were an announcement. Mary is the incarnation, God himself entering the world through the body of a teenage girl who says yes. The stakes could not be more cosmic, and still the door opens the same way it opened in the desert. Fear not, but there is one more appearance before the climax, and it is the most physical, the most bodily terror of them all. Go to a riverbank, the Tigris, in the land of exile. An old man named Daniel is standing there, a Hebrew who was carried off to Babylon as a young man and rose to advise the most powerful empires on earth. He has been mourning and praying for 3 weeks, and then he looks up. There is a man in front of him, but not like any man he has seen. His face like lightning, his eyes like fire, his arms and feet like polished bronze. And Daniel, a seasoned statesman who has stood in royal courts and read the writing on palace walls, Daniel comes completely undone. The text says his strength left him. His face turned pale, and then he fell to the ground with his face to the earth. Here's the part nobody tells you about that scene. The messenger has to touch him. A hand reaches down and sets Daniel trembling on his hands and knees, and then steadies him onto his feet. And twice in the same encounter, the same 3 words come. Fear not, Daniel, O man greatly beloved. Sit with that phrase. Greatly beloved. That is what heaven calls the man shaking face down in the dirt. Not get up, you coward. Not why are you afraid? Beloved. The fear and the tenderness are in the very same breath. And by now the pattern is undeniable. 6 appearances are coming into view: a desert, a temple, a field, a small town house, a riverbank, and every one of them opens with the same words spoken into real, physical, knees-buckling terror. It is not a coincidence anymore. It is a signature. It is how heaven signs its name on the worst moment of a human life. Which brings us, finally, back to a rock in the middle of the sea, and to the old man I told you about at the very beginning, the one who falls as though he is already dead. But before the rock there is a garden, and a stone rolled away. It is the 3rd morning after a crucifixion, and a small group of women are walking toward a tomb in the dark. Among them, Mary Magdalene and another Mary. They are not expecting a miracle. They are expecting a corpse. They have brought spices to do the last, tender, hopeless thing you do for someone you loved and could not save: anoint the body. Their grief is not abstract. It has a weight and a smell and a set of tasks. And the ground shakes. An angel comes down, rolls back the stone, and sits on it. And Matthew gives us this unforgettable detail about the soldiers guarding the tomb. The hardened Roman guards, trained men with swords, did shake and became as dead men. They fainted. They dropped like the dead in front of the very tomb they were paid to protect. So imagine what the women feel watching that. And into their fear, grief and terror braided together, the angel says it one more time. Fear not ye, for I know that ye seek Jesus, which was crucified. And then the sentence turns. He is not here. He is risen. Do you feel the pattern shift under your feet? Every fear not before this was spoken in front of a coming birth, a coming promise, a coming word. This one is spoken in front of an empty grave. The fear these women carried was the fear of death itself, the most final fear a human being knows. And that is exactly the fear heaven chose to answer with those same 3 words. Which brings us, at last, to the old man on the rock. His name is John. He is the last of the 12 still alive. An old man now, decades after the garden, after the empty tomb, after everyone he started with is gone. The early church historian Eusebius records the tradition that John was banished to a small volcanic island in the Aegean called Patmos and later released. Now be careful here. The exile is what the text and the earliest witnesses tell us. Some of the details later Christians filled in around it are tradition, not scripture. But the core is old and well attested, an aging apostle alone on a black rock in the sea. And on that rock, the sky opens one final time. John hears a voice behind him like a trumpet. He turns, and he sees the risen Christ in glory, hair white as snow, eyes like fire, a voice like rushing water, a face like the sun at full strength. And John, the man who once leaned his head on Jesus at supper, the man who stood at the foot of the cross, John does the same thing every human in this video has done. He collapses. His exact words, "I fell at his feet as dead," in Greek, hos nekros, as a corpse. The same word used of those Roman soldiers at the tomb, and then a hand. The risen Christ lays his right hand on the old man and says the words. The last time in the Bible these three words are spoken, and they come from the mouth of the risen Lord himself. "Fear not, I am the first and the last." There it is. The old man on the rock told it last. The pattern closes the way it opened. So let me say plainly what this is not. This is not a story about a coincidence of phrasing. This is not a story about a gentle turn of speech that happened to repeat. This is not a story about angels being polite. This is a story about the single most consistent thing heaven ever does. Walk into human terror and speak first and speak comfort before the human can even get back on their feet. And here's where it stops being about them and starts being about you. You know this fear. Maybe not a blinding angel, but you know the 3 a.m. kind. The moment your eyes snap open in the dark and your heart is already pounding before you remember why. The phone ringing at an hour phones should never ring. The hallway outside a hospital room where you are waiting for a word that will divide your life into before and after. Every one of us knows the specific terror of something larger than ourselves walking, uninvited, into our life. That corridor, that dark bedroom, that ringing phone, that is the exact kind of moment. The fear at the bottom, the shaking you cannot stop, that heaven kept choosing to speak into. Not once, not to one favorite, over and over, across 2,000 years, to a slave and a priest and a girl and a prophet and a grieving friend and a dying old man. The same 3 words. And they were never really about the past. So here's what you walk away with. First, the fact itself. Do not be afraid is the most repeated thing heaven's messengers ever say. It is not a throwaway line. It is not decoration on the edge of a miracle. Across the whole Bible, from a desert in Genesis to a rock in Revelation, it is the standard opening move, because the sight of the divine really did knock people flat, and the words were triage before they were anything else. Second, and this one is for you. Notice that heaven never once said those words instead of the fear. It said them into the fear. Not one person in this video was told there was nothing to be afraid of. Hagar's son really was dying. Mary really did have everything to lose. Daniel really did hit the ground. The comfort did not cancel the danger. It walked straight into the middle of it and spoke anyway. That is the pattern. God does not wait for you to stop shaking. He meets you in the shaking. And third, the one I actually want you to feel. Every one of those 3 words was spoken to a specific, terrified, ordinary person at the bottom of their worst moment, a slave, a priest, a teenager, shepherds, a prophet on his face, grieving women, an old man alone on a rock. And if the pattern is that consistent, if heaven really does keep saying the same thing, in the same way, into the same kind of terror, then there is no reason on earth to think it stops with them. The last person on that list is you, in the dark bedroom, in the corridor, on whatever rock you are standing on right now. Fear not. So let me ask you something, and I really do want your answer. Which fear not in this video hit you the hardest? Hagar in the desert? Mary in Nazareth? Daniel on the riverbank? The women at the tomb? Tell me below, and tell me why. I read everyone. 2,000 years of heaven leaning down into human terror. 6 people, 7 appearances, 1 sentence. And it was never really about them. It was practice. For the moment it gets said to you,